All right. Sorry, Jeremiah. Sorry, Adam, about that. So, as I was trying to say, I don't know how far I should back up here. Oftentimes, what it feels like is maybe because I'm not listening well, because I'm keeping myself so busy and not spending time sitting in quiet and listening for God, that He has to be more explicit with me and use. The cool thing is it's not always believers. Usually it is, right? Because He's prompting them through His Holy Spirit, but He's more powerful than that, right? He can use non-believers to speak into our lives in interesting ways. But hearing it from believers, to me, is more powerful, especially believers that I trust and I know that they are connected to Him, that because of their connection with Him, that it makes me, and then not just one, but this repeated message makes it feel like there's a reason why He's prompting multiple people in this way. For me, then, that means not, okay, I'm going to make the decision, these people will be right. What for me that means now is what I just said, it raises the question, is this what God is trying to speak to me? Because I'm not listening, and He needs to beat me over the head with a hammer because I'm not listening, and to actually slow down and ask Him, is this what you're trying to say to me? Am I really hearing this from you? So those are the two biggest ways that I feel like I can experience God speaking to me, either through that internal impression or through repeatedly hearing an unexpected message from other believers that I come into contact with. It's especially cool and freaky when it's another believer, but you don't know that. Right? One of the most powerful times I've had along those lines was I went to a computer science conference, teaching computer science conference. This was probably 10, 15 years ago now. I think it was in North Carolina. And I just started up a conversation with this gentleman. He was taking notes on his laptop next to me, and I noticed that he had some iconography that looked like it was, I couldn't tell if it was Orthodox or Catholic, but it looked like it fit that kind of thing, and struck up a conversation. And it was, by the end, it was like, can we pray for each other? And it was just a really amazing moment just to pray for him and asking God what I can pray for him, not knowing what's going on in his life, not what the big issues that he is dealing with in his life, but just asking God to speak that way, and him doing likewise for me, and just amazing to have him pray very specific things that I hadn't shared with him necessarily, but that he knew because he was communing with God clearly about what was going on, what struggles I was dealing with, what encouragement I needed. That's a really powerful experience to have God move in that way with another believer. It just it's if you haven't had that experience before, look forward to it. It's a really neat moment to experience. So that's how personally I feel like I hear God's voice in my life. Other questions that you guys have? Yeah.
How do you effectively discern when God is trying to reveal like an aspect of His plan in your life from kind of your own conscience and your own desires kind of trying to influence?
I have to just really be brutally honest with myself when I'm evaluating whether that impression that I'm talking about feels like it just does what my desires are, what I want to happen, or what I'm dreaming to happen, versus something that feels like it's truly in furtherance of God's mission. And for me, that oftentimes takes a really long time. I'm not good at just like, oh yeah, this is it. This is not it. It takes a really long time. And frankly, it oftentimes requires multiple, it requires me to hear the same idea multiple times from multiple sources, not just internally. If it's not from multiple sources, the only way to make sense of it is that it can't be self. Like, I would never want to do that. That's crazy. That's too hard, or too stressful, or I don't know. So it can take a long time. So for instance, let me try to give it a more concrete answer. I would say maybe 6 to 8 years ago. That's what I mean by a long time. It's not this, it's the thing. Maybe 6 to 8 years ago, I started getting this idea of something I wanted to do in my role here at Taylor. I thought, that might be interesting, that might be useful. But then I had to start asking that question. Is it because I think that's interesting? Is it stroking my ego? Is it just dealing with the part of me that doesn't like to keep doing the same thing over and over, but needs some amount of change just to kind of keep my mind stimulated and interested and so forth, right? All these kind of questions are going through my head, and I didn't know. So I started sharing. I tell my wife, "Hey, I had this idea. I'm naturally excited about it. What do you think?" Right? It's great to be able to bounce that idea off her because she does know me pretty well, and can filter away some of that stuff about, is this for your own ego or is it more than that? And I think her initial reaction was, that's kind of, I don't know about that. That's not, is that such a great idea or not? So that's helpful, right? Do I want to fight with my wife? Is that the way forward for me? Not a very exciting proposition. So there's one very good reason not to do it. But it kept percolating in my mind, like, you should do this. This is interesting. This is worth pursuing. So then, I don't know. Let's say 6 weeks, 10 weeks later, it's not leaving my mental consciousness. It's kind of in the background saying, hey, this is something that you should pursue. This is something that you should do. It'd be an interesting idea. So I start talking about the idea with some of the other faculty members here, like, hey, I had this crazy idea. What would it be like if I did this here? And get very mixed responses. Like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's going to cost a lot of money. Oh, really? That's, and so start to, okay, well, I don't know. Oh, that reminds me of this other thing. Here, let me give you a URL. You can, this is other program. Is it the same type of thing that you're talking about? Would you want to do that other program here? So mixture of encouragement, discouragement. And kind of like, I didn't know how to kind of understand that, kind of a semi-negative response from my wife, kind of a mixed response from the faculty, internally feeling like, oh yeah, I really like that idea. So I kind of just said, I like that idea, but I don't want to act on it of my own accord. I'm going to kind of just put it aside and kind of let it marinate a little bit, just kind of sit in the background. And it just felt like every 3 months, every 6 weeks, the idea would just keep coming back. And this is a good idea. You need to keep doing. You need to do. Not keep doing this. I haven't done it. You need to do this. This is a good idea. You need to do it. And I couldn't put it down. I just couldn't let it go. So I actually began to pursue this idea during sabbatical. Like, okay, well, if this is what I want to do, let me try working on it during sabbatical. So 6 years ago, and it takes until this year to kind of say, okay, fine, I'm going to do something about it. It's not something that I immediately did. Honestly, COVID kind of interrupted a lot of those plans for me and along those lines. But I'm hoping I've talked with faculty since I've come back about that idea as well. So I'm trying to see how I can move it forward. It's kind of difficult to think of doing new things at Taylor when everything is really like, how are we going to get through the pandemic? There's not a lot of like, let's vision cast for 20 years down the road, right? It's like, how do we maintain and make it through, right? I'm working on this new idea, this new plan of mine. I'm excited about it, and I feel like God just keeps, the only explanation at this point is that God keeps putting it back in my heart, say, hey, this is what I want the next, how I want you to next operate as a faculty member at Taylor. And so that's kind of what I'm pursuing. But it's taken me a long time. Yeah.
Are you able to share anymore?
Yeah. I'm not trying to keep it a secret. So, as you know, what I did for sabbatical was to work in industry, specifically work at a startup company in Silicon Valley that Nathan started 2 years ago, almost exactly here now. And what I want to see if I can figure out how to do is, can we connect students here at Taylor, both in the computer science and maybe in the business departments, more intentionally with startup companies. Ideally, what I would like to do is almost have like a semester abroad, but the abroad is like in Silicon Valley itself, where what you're doing is you're there and you got some sort of internship sponsored by some startup company there and so that's kind of, I don't know, say 3 classes worth of your work there. So you're doing maybe half-time work in an internship, exposed to what it's like to work for a startup company. And then the in-class experience in my mind, and this is where I still have to figure everything out, but in my mind, it would be kind of 2 classes that you would experience while you're there. The first one being intentionally then not just your experience with the company that you're working at, but bringing entrepreneurs to the class and speaking to the class about things like what's it like to do a startup company? How do you make a pitch to venture capital? How do you recruit people properly? How do you manage stock options? How do you lead the company in an effective manner? How do you get other people to believe in your ideas? How do you find an idea to start the company in the first place? Et cetera, et cetera. And just bringing these guests in from all over, wanting some of them to, what are the legal ramifications? How do you set up, if you're a computer scientist, how do you get business people to support you? If you're a business person, how do you get a technology person to make it happen? How do you partner effectively that? All these questions that you have to deal to be a successful startup. I think an important question now is, does it have to be in Silicon Valley, or can you do a startup effectively in places like Indianapolis or places that haven't traditionally been seen as a hub of startup activity and so forth. So that would be one of the classes. The second class then to me would be kind of like an applied, and maybe it would, in my dreams, it would count for contemporary Christian belief. But it would be like, how does that apply since you're in San Francisco, how does that apply in San Francisco? So from what I understand, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like it would be kind of patterned after how Dr. Seaman does contemporary Christian belief, where he has like 3 or 4 big questions that he wants you to ask about, that you have to be able to answer effectively as a Christian to share these ideas with the world. And what I want to do is have those questions be the questions that you would expect to have asked of you while you're in a place like Silicon Valley. So for me, I know that the two big questions that have to be asked are first have to do with kind of like an empiricist idea, like how can, don't all Christians reject science and don't, kind of check out their mind as a part of accepting some sort of religious belief, right? And what I see from evangelicals is that they reject science because they don't like global warming, they reject science because they don't like evolution, they, and on, right? It's just this constant rejection of science. So isn't that the same thing that you believe, or how can you associate with yourself with those people? So to me, that's like the big first question that has to be answered. The second question, especially in Silicon Valley, is an understanding of a biblical understanding of sexuality. Because LGBT is not just a word or an acronym there, but it is really, when I went out to interview at Anchorage where Nathan was, summer of 2019, and it happened to be during Gay Pride Month. And I've never seen so many rainbow flags in all my life. It was more than in your face, right? There's such a strong support for the LGBT community there. And so again, I feel like the traditional message from evangelicals has been maybe even hateful, certainly bordering on that, the LGBT community. And so how can you believe what the traditional stance of evangelicals? Does that mean you hate me? Does that, how can you do that? How can you live that way? And I've had that conversation actually with people there. So those are the two questions I know would have to be part of that class. I'm not quite sure what other questions would be part of it, but to me then that would be like, this is what you're going to experience as a Christian. This is how you're going to have to defend your faith. This is how you're going to have to live it out. Prepare now. Be ready for, just like Paul says, you have to be ready for an answer for your faith. If you're going to live in a place like this, you need to be ready to do that. And so, in my mind, it's kind of that combination of working and getting that experience of living a startup, plus feedback from these people who live that startup life constantly, and then approaching it from a Christian worldview, and what does that mean? So that's kind of what, in my mind, that experience would look like, and I think it would fit great in our department. I think it's great in the business department. If it worked, awesome. I'd love to, like I said, make it like a thing where it's not just a Taylor experience, but you could bring students from other Christian institutions and be really powerful for a lot of schools. So that's my thing that I want to start to pursue and make happen. For the longest time, I thought, oh, well, the hard thing is going to be money. Because it's super expensive in San Francisco. But who knows? The pandemic is really screwing up the real estate market there. I would not want to own land in San Francisco right now. Let's just put it that way. It's so it might become feasible after all. I don't know. Other questions about hearing God's voice and making decisions? It's not easy to do. Even this sabbatical, I've said when I talked with a lot of you guys, probably in positive terms. Even there, I made stupid mistakes, like the way I pursued it. Basically, I made a decision, and my family felt like I made the decision without their input. So they felt like I just dragged them to California with me, which was not a very, at least to start with, it was not positive from any of their perspectives. Like, why are we leaving our home just so that you can have fun working in California? That's not our idea of fun, Dad. I never could convince my oldest, I don't think, that it was a good idea. But I think, so it would have been better if I had gotten buy-in from my wife and my kids before I just kind of, I thought I had, but I obviously didn't do such a great job there. And yet today, when I went home for lunch, there was a drawing on like our family community whiteboard for sending messages with each other. And there was a picture of the Golden Gate, and captioned underneath it, hand-drawn picture of the Golden Gate, captioned underneath it was something to the effect that we miss being there. So yeah, that was a good feeling to see that for most of them it's a positive experience now. Making decisions is hard. It's even harder when it's not just your decision. Sometimes when I made a decision, I haven't always known in the moment that it was how influenced it was by God. So for example, decision about where to go for graduate school, for me ending up at Northwestern, I saw looking back how God influenced me to do certain things or to make it a Northwestern an available option for me. How He put that in my path and set some things up really fortuitously, so it was very easy for me, even though I wasn't necessarily hearing God say, you should go to Northwestern versus any of the other options I had available. But looking back at it, saying, oh, clearly you were making this available. You were guiding me in ways that I could respond faithfully to that I might not normally do. And I'm super glad that's where I ended up. It's where I connected with people in the most meaningful way at a church was during that time. And that small group at that church is where I met my wife. So that was another positive experience. And very much kind of shaped who I am spiritually, which is funny. Making a decision about graduate school is one of the most shaping spiritual decisions of my life. But that's how I can see it looking backwards, that I wasn't thinking about in that moment in time. All right. I'm going to end a little bit early today because I have to go home and grade my daughter. Coach. He's the right term. Coach my daughter. She's in the tournaments for soccer. I think I am this week going to post a video from last year's retreat. So there's gonna be one chapter instead of two. We're gonna decrease the reading from the Quran, one chapter, chapter 5 verses 2. And so I want you to watch that video, I believe is what I'm gonna post. It's Dr. Sterritt's talking about how to view our role as technologists, engineers, and its intersection with missions, and how we can kind of understand that looking forward. So I think I'm going to post that video, and we can then kind of discuss both the reading for next week and in that video will probably be our primary activity for next week. Other than that, keep making progress on planning for the mini retreat and any paper writing that you have to do for this class. Have a great day, everyone. I'll see you next week.